Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Talk Soup session this morning for kindergarten and first grade teachers. We are happy to be sharing with you some HMH professional learning regarding planning and also the spiraling of skills that obviously you've noticed in the textbook. And so this morning, although I do not see them in here yet, we have Angie Clendenin, who is our HMH rep, and also Genevieve Holmes, who will be presenting and sharing information with you this morning. So as soon as they join us, we will be getting started.
My email is on the website. Welcome to your Into Reading session. We're going to be talking about spiraling skills. We're going to be talking about planning instructions to really meet your students' needs. And so really quickly, I do want to just let you think and what factors really inform your planning and instructions. I know there's a whole bunch of different things that you could take into consideration. And I'm going to show you some resources that will really help you kind of drive how you choose to teach, what you choose to teach, and then we will just go from there. So your learning outcomes today, we're going to look at the scope and sequence and then spiral learning. We're going to look on how to prioritize instruction when planning for whole group and small group instruction, looking at different resources on ed, and then finally, we'll wrap up and really look at that whole and small group instructions and how to choose what to teach. So in the chat, I posted the link to my Padlet. I'm going to go ahead and go to my Padlet just so I could show you quickly around. The first thing you're going to see on my Padlet is the Virginia Into Reading correlations. And so if you hover over them and press down as it downloads, this is for grade 2. It's all the way through kindergarten. And so you'll just want to download the one that goes with your grade. And so you can see the standards of learning on the left side and the teacher's materials. That's everywhere where that particular standard is hit on. We're going to talk about this in a hot minute, but know that the standards are hit on multiple times throughout the entire curriculum, starting with Module 1, starting with that first day of school when you start presenting. Another thing on my personal Padlet is the Into Reading connections. I was up in a school up in New York City last year, and when looking at planning, I had a teacher say to me that they didn't realize that they're going to be talking about holidays in Module 6. And if they'd known that, then they would have moved their holiday talk during social studies to later on in the year. And so this is called Into Reading Connections. And you could download this, and it shows what curriculum tie-in, what science tie-in is going to be with each grade and with each module, what social studies tie-in that there's going to be, the learning mindset that's prevalent in all of our modules, and then the inquiry and research project. So this is another good planning tool to go ahead and align so that you can talk about the same thing and reinforce the learning, both in social studies and in science. And then just to show you a little bit more about my Padlet, I've got the foundational scopes and sequence and the normal scope and sequence downloaded. And so there's a lot of useful resources. The Padlet I use just to place all my documents that I'll be referring to. I also keep them on my Ed account, and so in a personal folder under my plans. And so these are two areas that I go to. And the last one really quickly, this is an Excel spreadsheet grades, kindergarten through 5th grade. And this has all the sight word lists and when they're going to come to fruition within the different modules within the different weeks. So I have some teachers downloading these, and they make the font to size 200, and then they just print them, cut, and paste them onto their sight word walls. So that's my Padlet, but I really wanted you guys to see these standards of learning, because as we continue talking through the spiraling of skills and how it's reinforced during the entire curriculum, you're going to be referring back to that. So there's a couple documents. I just showed you the scope and sequence. I showed you the standards of learning. Skills are revisited numerous times throughout the entire curriculum. The standards are taught with the idea that students are going to be going back to them in some way time and time again before reaching mastery. In the end, everything truly does come together. And so it's really great to kind of see how the skills, they're just not taught once and then you kind of move on. Does anybody have any questions about the resources? I know when I plan, I'm actually currently teaching with Into Reading. I work 3 days a week in a school here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And as I plan with my co-teacher, I have printed out the scope and sequence, the Virginia or the North Carolina Planning Guide. And as I go through the individual skills, as I go through the individual skills, I kind of highlight them to make sure. If you go on Ed, and you use your little magnifying glass, and you can type in scope and press enter. You'll see the two resources for the scope and sequence, and then the foundational skills scope and sequence. And so you could either add those to your plan or open them. And so I really use this guide as I plan and as I go through my lesson plan for the entire, we do months at a time, and so that we can make sure we hit on everything. Does anybody have any questions? Let's see, the Padlet appears blank when I click the link. I'm sorry, I'm going back.
That's okay. This is Angie. I'm so
Hi.
sorry. I was not able to jump in, and my dogs are going to bark as soon as I go off mute, but I was not able to jump in at first, but I just want everybody to know that I am taking attendance. So if someone logs in late, please make sure that you message me or put it in chat, and I will go ahead and I will put that in chat so people can see it. But if you notice somebody, please let them know. Thank you all for being here. There's 83 people on the call. That is insane and way more than we're used to. So we will do our very best to make sure that we, meet your needs. Genevieve, I've got to say, I see lots of Padlets, and that is the best one I've ever seen.
Thank you.
So ladies and gentlemen, please copy that and use it. There's nothing better than using somebody else's stuff they've already spent the time to work on. So welcome. If you have any specific questions, I'm going to do my best to answer. And Genevieve, I will get with you if there's something I don't know. Otherwise, move on for purposes of time. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Angie. All right. And if you didn't get the link to the Padlet, I will be sending it out again in a follow-up email. And so again, it's an ever-changing, like the Ed platform, my Padlet is an ever-changing, flowing kind of deal. And so you'll see stuff newly popped up. I will say the Into Reading connections and the Excel spreadsheet, those were created out of necessity when I was meeting with some teachers. And so you won't find those resources on Ed, but everything else you can find on Ed. All right, so let's talk about some things to question before when planning instructions. I know that planning and prioritizing learning is at the top of mind, especially given this school year. And before we quickly go any further, I want to introduce you to Bridge and Grow. These are resources that are going to support you. They support you during the school year. They're going to support you as you get back into school in August. And they're really divided into 3 sections. First is the getting back to school, and this is just going to give you tips and strategies for building that community, managing that classroom, and it's formatted so it's available whether in person or remote learning. The second one is determining the student needs. This resource is going to give you tips and strategies for looking at the different student needs and really assessing them. And then that third one is accelerating that student's learning. And that's going to be one that I'm going to actually show you on Ed right now. And so if you go to Ed and you go to your Discover page, it's actually the first, and I'm going to be working out of first grade for right now. It's under the first block is your Bridge and Grow. And these are the 3 buckets that I just talked about: getting back to school, determining students' needs, and then accelerating that student learning. If you want to go to that Excel spreadsheet, it's going to open up and download really quickly as an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to go ahead and enable editing, and it allows you to filter it out by grade, by standard. And as we go across, it gives you the text, the skills, and then the resource title. And so you would just go through, find the skills where you're really needing to focus on, whether as a whole group or as a small group, even one-on-one. What I love about Into Reading is it truly gives you all the resources you'll ever need to really individualize and differentiate the learning for each individual's kids. And so looking at the resources, you've got the Read and Respond journals. Some of them, it might say the Word Study Studio. I will say most of the resources, if they're not the leveled readers and the anchor charts, they're going to be found under your Intervention tab in your Discover. This by far, out of all the tabs on Ed, is maybe my favorite tab, and the one that I find myself going to the most is here where you find your Read and Respond journal and your Word Study Studio, and for first and second grade, your blended books. And I've actually used the blended books for grades as low or as for my kindergarten students, especially during the back end of the year. Have any of you guys gotten to utilize the Read and Respond journals or even the blended books? So the Read and Respond journal, really quickly, you have 30 of them. There is 3 per module. And so really quickly, it's exactly what it sounds like. They're going to read a little bit of passage and then they're going to respond. So this is module 1, week 1. So why do you think the author repeats the word mad? Read this page out loud. Did you hear a beat? What gives it a beat? And then finally, at the end, you've got the 4 key questions. It could be anywhere from 3 questions to as many as 6 for the older grades. And so they'll just go in, and it's a great tool. A lot of the testing is written this way. And so I've been able to use those a lot. The other component is these blended books that I was talking to you about. If you open up the table of contents, and I'm not going to go too deep into them, the blended books are these highly decodable texts, and they promote fluency, they promote decoding. And so you could see for grade 1, you have 200 books. For grade 2, you have 188 books. And they are skills-based. So you would go down and look at the skills and go find book number 7 if you're looking to work on the letter P. If you are looking for, let me show you, prefixes, go to book 145. These print front to back, and so they're just 2-page books, and they're easily able to be printed, or I do have some teachers who send them home. And so you could see really quickly, this is SAMSAT, CATSAT. This is focusing on the short A along with these consonants. And so this is the first page, and this is the second page. It's already set up for you to print front to back. And so those are the blended books. The last resource in the intervention tab is this Word Study Studio and the foundational skills. So if you go down to the foundational skills, and again, I'm just going to go to the table of contents. These are 415 individual lessons that you have access to. And again, gets very, very specific. These are meant to be used in your small groups. I do have a couple of teachers, especially teaching remotely, that they'll choose to use it as a whole group. I just had one that I worked with last week that used a lesson because of the segments and syllables. And so you would just go find the lesson that you need, the number it corresponds, and then that handy search tool. So if you just type in 255 and press search, the actual lesson will pop up. Let me open up the lesson just so you could quickly see. On the left side are the objectives, any materials. On the right side, you will find how to teach it, the guided practice, what to say, what to do, and there are sometimes correct and redirect skills. The nice thing about the intervention resources is that they are very specific and they're very easy to identify. They're all under that one tab. Before I go on, does anybody have any questions about that bridging and growing? I'm going back to revisit the chat. I need to open it up. Amanda, what resource were you talking? And Michelle, I'm so glad to see that you use the blended books. They are really a great resource. I actually have some of my 3rd and 4th graders utilizing it. Oh, the Foundational Skills and Word Study Studio. So it's under the intervention tab. And then if you filter out by component, you're going to see you've got the let me go back into my component. You're going to have the Foundational Skills and Word Study Studio High Frequency Word Cards. These are the words you're going to focus on that you could display. You've got the practice pages, so your student sides, and then your teacher's guides. One thing I did fail to scroll down and show you, if you want to go into grade kindergarten and then 1st grade, it's going to open up that alignment chart. And so this takes all the guesswork really of trying to find lesson. So you could see this module 1, week 3. If you needed more support on teaching some students on the letter T, you would just go to lesson number 24. So it's already divvied out for you depending on how you're teaching, what you're teaching, what module you're teaching in. And so it really is a great resource. And again, the easiest way to find the in ed is type out the number, but they are all PDFs and they are actually, you can see grouped. This is sessions 1 through 120. I just had a district in Indiana print all these out for every single teacher. So this is 161 pages, but you've got all 120 lessons. I hope that answered your questions. Perfect. Kara, how do you find the Excel sheet of the skills? If you want to go to your Discover tab and scroll down to the Bridge and Grow under Resources, it's going to be the Excel version right here. HMH Priority Standards Pathways for K-6 English Language Arts. And then you would just press open and it'll open up directly into that Excel spreadsheet. And again, use the filters. So I know I've got K1 on here, so you can go through hit kindergarten, press OK, and then filter out that way. All right, so we talked about how the skills are revisited multiple times throughout the curriculum, and the writers of Into Reading, it blows me away because they do revisit skills over and over and over again. And I'm just going to close some of the stuff that I'm not going to use. Perfect. And we're going to talk about questions to kind of consider when you're planning and prioritizing. So one of the big things is the foundational skills. Students in kindergarten through grade 6, they're going to experience the foundational skills instruction really during their literacy block. Each lesson into reading, again, like I just said, is really carefully taught out. And so this is a closer look of these foundational skills. Daily instruction really follows that gradual release model. The I do, the we do, the you do. I know, like I said, I was in the classroom earlier this week, and we were focusing on a particular lesson, and I just projected Ed straight from the board, and you went into your I do. We were talking about capitalization, actually. And so you have the opportunity to meet the needs as a whole group, and then all the individual resources to really target those groups of students through modeling, shared application, and then independent practice. So here, this is one from, I'm thinking, grade 1. Instruction is scaffolded through the gradual release model and different other instructional models. Remember, all the instructional models are going to be highlighted in green. Each lesson really begins with a spotlight on sound. And then what I really like, especially right now, since we are all wearing these masks, are our articulation videos. And so when you're looking, I'm going to go ahead and jump into just one of my teacher's guide. When you're looking at teaching any individual lesson, that whole bottom band, go into the individual lesson. That whole bottom band is going to give you supports to really truly meet the needs of your English learners, the correct and redirect, and then any links to small group instruction and the options to really differentiate the learning will be at the bottom. And that's the way it is for each individual lesson. And so the bottom bands, as you go through your lessons, your teacher's books read either online or even in print, that bottom band I use on a regular basis. All right, so going back to the foundational skills. So the I do it, you all talk about it. You can watch the articulation video. You go into the we do it, sound by sound blending, and then they practice at home at home. They practice independently with that independent practice. So you'll find some of the resources that are located, whether they're printables, the Start Right readers, and then something new that we just introduced, Ed, again, is this ever-flowing, ever-changing, ever-adding, ever-making it better, is if you guys have not seen the Practice and Application tab, if you go into Practice and Application, we just introduced, I think, this year, I want to say it was like February 28th, to be very specific, these vocabulary and phonics interactive practice that are very individual, or they're crafted to the individual module. So if you guys have not had the ability to use those, I'm not going to spend too much time on the interactive practice, but it walks your students through. And again, you've got your 3 dots here, so you could tie it back into your Google Classroom. But it goes over, as it loads up, It goes over the words, they're the flip cards, and then it has the matching activity at the end. And so try to do your best, new and not old. And so that's an example of the vocabulary. And then you also have the phonics. Has anybody used these yet? As I go really quickly through my chat. Just know that they are under your practice and application. And again, you could assign them. All right, let's go into really quickly. You guys have access to the daily show and teach slides. We know the importance of really helping your young readers develop those strong foundational skills. And so HMH has developed the slides for you. So the beauty of the slides, and just like that Excel spreadsheet, when you go into your Discover tab and you go to Daily Show and Teach Slides, again, they are specific, lesson specific. So this is week 1, lesson 1. You have them for all the individual modules. They will download into a PowerPoint. I'm going to actually enable editing. I will say the best way to do this is not in presentation mode. It's going to be, you're going to want to hide your notes, which is a feature that really quickly, it gives you the script of what to say, what to do. And then the way you want to use this, you want to definitely hide your notes feature if you want. And then some of the interactive stuff, listen to sounds. And so you would just take the letter and you could move them. So the first one is M. So if you are in presentation mode, you don't have the flexibility to move the different text boxes around. So you'll want to make sure that you're in editing mode, because some of the slides do have that blending component. So right here, let's blend. So it'll allow you to grab the slide, drop it onto your board. And again, you'll want to make sure that you are in editing mode just to be able to do this. And so those are your foundational skills and Word Study Studio, and those are your individual slides. Hopefully, I'm just going to go back and check the chat every now and then. Hopefully you guys have gotten to use those, especially for everyone who's teaching remotely. All right, so we went through using the slides. Let's talk about the planning now and questions to consider. This PowerPoint as a whole, the rest of it gives you questions to kind of keep in mind when planning. So for collaborative planning, what skills are being introduced? What resources you need to support your instructions? How can I reinforce the lesson during your small group instruction? And then how can you practice these skills independently? One of the things to definitely consider is your must do, your can do, and your time. And so whenever you're looking at your priorities, this is our planning model that we do suggest. So for the must do, what content must you address that your students are required to learn? You could definitely use on the Bridge and Grow connection. Again, use that Excel spreadsheet so that you could refer to your priority standards pathways to inform your planning. And then think about what content is optional that you can address if time permits. I know when you look at your week at a glance, and one of the first things that I do whenever I talk to my teachers for the very first time when they're being introduced into reading, I tell them to look at the week at a glance and just take a deep breath. You've got all these bullet points that you're supposed to hit on a daily basis, and know that some of them you could kind of merge some of them. You might not have to revisit. And so we're going to look at how to kind of determine those materials through some questions. So when thinking about vocabulary, this is one of the instruction types of Into Reading. We provide rich instruction to build a wide variety of vocabulary skills. There are big idea words, words to know, power words. You've got your critical vocabulary. In kindergarten, vocabulary is woven in each lesson. In grades 1, your vocabulary takes place in lessons 2 through 15 of each module. And it's really during the instruction, students are going to learn, they're going to practice new words, they're engaged in that academic discussion, look at ways to construct that meaning from text, and then put your own ideas into writing to build those language skills. So actually, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see that this teacher's guide has been highlighted. I've got green over here, I've got yellow over here. Notice I underlined the words hollow and tender. All the power words were already highlighted on this page. So underlining the specific words that I'm going to actually really hone in to teach, because I know these are new to my students, whereas the other words I think are pretty familiar to them. So by underlining them, it's going to remind me to really focus on that during instruction. So we'll cover the words hollow and tender at a deeper level. Also, I highlighted the word vocabulary, and I also highlighted the I do it and the we do it sections in green. So I'm going to make sure to kind of definitely hit on these. I'm going to say the power word, so everyone say hollow. Repeat after me. Hollow means that something that is hollow has space inside it. And then we could talk about examples. I know actually we just talked about hollow, and we used the example of an Easter egg or an Easter bunny. And so one of my students said, that is hollow. They were disappointed that there wasn't chocolate throughout the whole way. But the you do it right here, I highlighted in yellow. If I run low on time during whole group instructions, I may have them choose to do the you do it during independent practice or at a literacy center. And so some questions to kind of consider when thinking about the vocab. How much time do you need to allocate to vocab based on your students' prior knowledge? Are the skills new to the students, or is it review? After a brief introduction of the words, can your students work independently on this material at the literacy centers? So these are all questions to consider. And again, I'm going to be posting these questions, and I'll drop them on the Padlet, because I have guiding questions for everything from vocabulary to the writing workshop. So when thinking about your shared reading, this is your literacy block. This is an example of how you might highlight your way through teaching your shared reading. So looking through, and again, I'm gonna make it a little bit larger so you could see. I'm definitely gonna do the close reading. We're definitely gonna read the book together, but referring back to the Anger chart I put in red, I may choose to do this as a independent group to kind of reinforce their learning after we do the first read. And then we're gonna do the whole writing response together. And so there are some things that are essential parts to introducing different skills to your students. But also this is one of those priorities right here. You can see that I went into that Excel spreadsheet that I showed you, identified reading inventory 3.2 for grade 3. And I can use these titles and components to really hone in on that skill. And so questions to keep in mind whenever you're looking at your reading mini lesson, is this skill new to your students? Do you need to address really all three parts of the lesson? So remember, again, it is the gradual release model. You've got the connect and teach, you got the apply to text, engage and respond. Or can you modify it to meet the needs of your individual students? Can your students work independently? And then think about how are some ways you could reinforce this all during small group lesson. Are there any questions? I'm going to go really quickly and check the chat. All right.
There may have been some questions, but I had a call, so I stepped out for just a minute, and I may have missed them. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I just went and checked the chat, and the last thing we got was Kara, Wolf is here. Or perfect. Or Summer Green was here.
Gotcha.
All right. So let's go ahead. We talked about the vocabulary. We talked about those foundational skills. We talked about the reading mini lesson. Let's look at the small group, independent, and collaborative work and how you're really gonna figure out what bullet points you're going to teach. I know, and I'm going to go back really quickly to my week at a glance. You've got all these individual options for differentiation and individualization. They're always going to be in yellow. And for each individual lesson, as you go through, you have those options for differentiation and collaborative work. And they're going to be the last 2 pages of every single lesson. Into Reading provides you so much material that you don't need to try and build your lesson plans. You don't need to try to go find resources. I promise they're all here for you. And so just know the last 2 pages are the options for differentiation and also your small group instruction. And then these correlate to all these ideas that are being told on each individual page, on each individual lesson. So when looking at ideas for your rotations, one of the things that I use the most is the groups feature in Ed. You could prioritize instructions for rotations using an assessment they may have just done. You can prioritize instructions and create groups using the reading levels. And so every single week I go in on Sunday and I assign my students different Rigby leveled readers that they could go in. And so you would just go here to create groups. You could add groups, you could delete groups. I actually have a group called LTELs or my ELs. These are ways that I could send more resources for my English learners all in one swoop. And so feel free to create any of your groups. And it's just a drag and drop type of feature. So if you're doing your reading groups, you would just drag and drop. You could rename your different groups and title them different. So you're going to be wanting to, and then you could display these groups whenever you are done with them. So whenever you go look at different resources and for it to show up on their Ed platform, I definitely encourage you guys to do so by group. So that way, if you need to, for my ELs, I assign them the close read screencasts. And so I'll open it up. And again, your filters are going to be your best friend. And so actually, it's going to be under the instructional purpose. And I could go in there and find exactly what I need to assign it to my students. Filter it out even further. And so these are all your My Books. And so now that I've made that group, I could go in there and assign it solely by the group. So on the right side is another Bridge and Grow resource. Anytime you kind of see that bridge, remember I showed you the leveled readers and the resource component. Again, those are all the resources that will be listed for you. Finally, when looking at the prioritizing instruction for rotations, before you get started, you're definitely going to want to take some time, go through the rotation so that everybody understands, so that you're not pulled away if you're working within small group. And then finally, as you meet with your small groups during rotation, the rest of your students are working on that collaborative and independent task. Where they get to build knowledge, have meaningful. Sorry, there must be a dog outside. Have meaningful conversation with their peers, reinforce their concepts, and apply text. So students are going to do this. Hold on, let me go have my husband grab him really quickly. All right, so we just closed the door, so that's how we fix with the dog. And I'm sorry, Ruth. Ruth, there's so much in there that filtering it all out, finding what you need is sometimes the hardest part. All right. Identifying resources, finding the resources, your easiest way that that's gonna happen, or your easiest way to find it, is to either utilize your filters, or when you're in that Excel spreadsheet, one of the easiest way is you could do this. I'm just gonna copy the ask and answer questions portion, and then go find it. Actually, ask and answer questions, and then you could use your filter. And here is the anchor chart for ask and answer questions. Utilize your filters, utilize the magnifying glass to locate the resources. And I know that's part and parcel why I created a Padlet, for those things that I'm going to often and over, I've dropped them into my Padlet or my shared document. The reason I utilize Padlet is because I don't bring my personal computer, my HMH computer, to work. I use the computers they have at school, but I could always just log into my Padlet and grab what I need in there. But again, the easiest way to find those resources is going to be in taking that Excel spreadsheet, copying and pasting from the note, and then finding it out. And then I see Angie said the search bar, I'd like to be able to just type in anchor chart 5 and then pop it up. Ruth, I will definitely pass that information along. I've had the ability to be on there 2 years. Go ahead, Angie.
I was just going to add, one of the things that's great about this program is that the things that you guys search for over and over and over, we're keeping data on that, and we're going to make them easier to find. A great example of that are the decodables. Forever, they were listed as just start-right readers, and nobody had a clue what a start-right reader was. And so I kept going to them saying, teachers have no idea what that means. And so we changed the wording. As you come up with those things, I want you to feel free to message me, email me. I'll put my name in the chat, which I think you probably already have. But I love the feedback, because when we give that to the creators, their entire goal is to make this as user-friendly for you as possible. And unlike programs you've purchased in the past, it will continue to get better. Also, I put it in the chat and I'll say it again, double-edged sword. You have all these resources. There's so many, you'll never be able to use them all, and you have to understand that. But and that's hard for teachers because we want to cover everything. But the other piece to that is it is hard when you're trying to find things. I always encourage people to just pick the resources that they like to use weekly and learn how to filter those quickly. I do hope that that becomes easier for you all as time goes on and we sort things out and make those search filters a little bit easier to indicate. But I'm going to say you guys are doing great, because even with your questions, you know the content, you've been teaching it, you know, you have a lot of support, and that's super, super important.
Perfect. Thank you, Angie. And I will say those big changes on Ed, whenever anything big happens, we're going to put a notification on your dashboard right here. Welcome back, teacher. It's going to give you your message right there. Also, whenever you log in and discover if new resources were added, and actually, let me just jump into grade 10 really quickly. This button right here, what's new, is going to pop up. And so when you click on what's new, it's going to tell you what was introduced, how to find it, and how to use it. And so anything big and new, it's going to pop up this blue button right here. So please make sure you guys do check it, because like Angie said, this is Ed is a living and breathing person, is adapting, it's constantly changing. And I just, like Angie said, I do go back and I let the curriculum writers and the ed designers know, hey, this is what we need. And so things like the daily show and teach slides, things like just changing start ride readers to decodables. I know one of my things is and I'm looking for it, the student choice library. These are where your focal text for your writing workshops are going to be. And so knowing those kinds of things and knowing the little oddities of ed, we're constantly trying to make it easier for you. One of the things under teacher resources, if you want to go under teacher resources and look at all the different components, you have additional resources. You have your genre study teacher's guide. I know the other day I was working with a teacher and they're like, we just want to see all the poems in the stuff, in the curriculum. So your filters are your best friends. I've had the pleasure of working with Ed for 2 years, and filters are my best friend. All right. I use the in-hand teachers, and when I go, thank you, Ms. Rutherford. All right, so let's, I brought up the questions to consider. So questions to consider when looking at your rotations. And again, don't feel that you need to write these down. We're going to get these to you. So what are some groups for differentiation? I know my groups, even though I'm only in the classroom a couple days a week, they change, especially depending on my students' needs, depending on how they've done. So what content can be assigned online? What are your students able to do independently? And these are all guiding questions. So, yes.
Genevieve, I think Jean Weigel has a question for us.
Oh, thank you. Let me go ahead and slip on over. Go ahead, Jean.
Actually, I don't have a question. I'm just not great with technology, so I turned my sound button off, and I must have hit that. Sorry, guys. Hi, everybody, and happy kindergarten.
Oh, Jean, I love you.
Day. So happy kindergarten, everybody.
That's awesome. All right, some questions to consider whenever you're looking at the writing workshop. So throughout daily lessons, your students are going to take ownership of their writing by looking at that focal text and model writing. What I love about the Into Reading is the amount of books and literature your students are exposed to. At the kindergarten level, students really engage in interactive writing before writing their own pieces. You know, my daughter went into kindergarten at a level H reading level. I had broken my leg when she was 3 and I had 5 surgeries. And so I taught her how to read because I couldn't do anything else. With Into Reading, she was able to have the ability to write on the very first day rather than draw a picture. So Into Reading was able to meet the needs of where she was at her learning, while some of her peers were able just to either draw a picture. I will say this has been a couple years, and so she is now on grade reading level. So questions to consider when looking at that writing instruction is how much time do you have for writing workshop? Are the skills new to your students? We love writing conferencing and student conferencing with Into Reading. And it doesn't have to be something intentional with 5 minutes per student. It's, hey, Joe, what are you working on? Or can you tell me a little bit more about this piece? You guys are conferring with your students. It's not labeled like that. Anytime you have a discussion with them, it's conferring. And then when will your students engage in independent writing? I wanted to leave some time for questions, and we've looked at the scope and sequence and the spiral learning. I promise you the skills are revisited multiple amount of times. If you want even more information about your standards, you could go into the standards tab, view by standards, click on the great state of Virginia, and then you'll be able to search for the information and the resources that match with those individual resources.
They're lucky. They only have the great state of Virginia on there.
That's right. I get overwhelmed when I see like 565 resources attached to one thing, and I have to keep reminding myself that I have all the states attached to my account. So for our K.6, identifying, naming capital and lowercase letters of the alphabet, here are your 62 resources that have to do. And of course, it brings up my favorites, the Alpha Friends. And so it'll jump directly to that individual resource that will help. So you guys have, go download your standards of learning, your correlation. Go ahead and download that scope and sequence. And then you also have this document, the ability to search by standards here. When you're looking at prioritizing your learning for whole group, your small group, take a deep breath. Breathe. Know that there's resources for you. It's a matter of looking for them, cutting and pasting them into the magnifying glass, finding them, or utilizing your filters. And then I will send you the different questions to consider. Angie, did I miss anything?
I don't think so. And I really believe that you covered a lot of ground. And I know this is, just trying to make sure we get as much in for you guys as possible, but please don't hesitate to reach out. You're always here. The ladies that work with you know how to get in touch with me, and normally they just send me a list of questions, excuse me, and I try to get back to you that day. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to reach out to Genevieve to find it, because who better to know the answers than somebody that's actually in the classroom teaching it, right? So thank you guys. We are already like a minute past your time, and we want to be aware of that. If there's anybody that has a question though, jump on and ask. You have our contact information, and have a wonderful day.
Ladies, thank you so much. And teachers, please complete the survey on our TalkSoup site at your earliest convenience. We appreciate it so we can have additional feedback. Thank you. Have a great day. And Genevieve and Angie, we will see you in the next session.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.